When the Germans invaded Russia in the summer of 1941, they had 3,300 tanks available to them. And to just give you a comparison, Plan 1919 was going to be using over 5,000 tanks if it had ever come off. And that's why this small introduction, we're just going to look at Plan 1919 and why it's seen as so significant. Now, at the beginning of 1918, the Western Allies think that they're just going to have to hold on for the following year. Germany has, in essence, won on the Eastern Front. Russia has withdrawn from the war. Dozens of German divisions come back to face the Western Allies. And America is not yet seriously in the fight. It has joined the war, but its army is in training, it's only starting to arrive, and the American commander Pershing does not want the American forces to be used until they're really ready. So for the Western Allies, there is this period at the beginning of 1918 where all they can do is hope they can hang on. Both sides, in essence, in 1918 are getting worn out, but the Germans have this injection of those new divisions from the Eastern Front. Now, their attack at the beginning of 1918, that goes on really till the early summer, fails. And they don't actually knock the Western Allies out in time. But meanwhile, in the background, planning is going on in those Western Allies, ready for the next year when they do think they might be able to win the war with American material, American men, and their own plans, which include a much greater use of the tank. Now, in January of 1918, Fuller, having looked at how the tank was used at Cambrai, Fuller is the chief of staff of the tank corps. He's nicknamed Boney Fuller, perhaps after Napoleon Bonaparte, but also he's got this great domed, balding forehead, and he's considered a real thinker. Now, Fuller comes up with this idea, instead of just doing a small area breakthrough with tanks, why don't we have a massive tank force to break through the enemy line, but also have a new type of tank? And they've been discussing out in France a vehicle that a chap called Johnson has been designing, thinking through the ideas of, that they're going to call the Medium D. Now, the Medium D gives the idea to Fuller that actually, if you've got the right type of equipment, not only will you break through, but you can exploit that gap in the German front line to the point of going very deep and going very deep quickly. And the big difference about Plan 1919 is he's not just talking here about a local area tactical gain by the use of tanks. He's talking about a massive blow that will completely knock out the Germans on the Western Front and therefore lead to an Allied victory. And there's a real big step change in difference. He sees the use of those medium Ds after the heavier tanks are broken through. They race ahead. They have lorried infantry to accompany them. We have aircraft overhead. They're starting to design a vehicle that's called the Sopwith Salamander, so it's armor plated, so it's actually good for ground attack. They're going to resupply the advancing troops with aeroplanes so they can drop supplies to keep them going. And key to his plan, he's saying, don't go for the body, in essence, in trying to knock out the enemy, go for the head. A bullet to the brain is one of the phrases he uses. And his idea there is that if you take away the thinking power, in other words, the headquarters, the high command of the German military in these different areas that are being attacked, they will not be able to respond. And again, his argument is saying that an organised force will always defeat a disorganised force. And if you take the organising ability away, in other words, the command structure, that will work. Interestingly, he doesn't say take out the communications, because what he actually wants to happen is those communications still to function so that confusion is spread, panic engendered. So that would be another way of how to defeat the enemy. Now that plan, it's put to Sir John Kapp. Kappa's got his own ideas. He's already in January of 18, he's already been writing about the future use of tanks the following year. And after the battle in the summer at Hamel, where the new Supreme Allied Commander, Field Marshal Foch, he sees the utility of the tank there in a greater way. He's a great tank enthusiast now. So the new British Chief of the Imperial General Staff, Sir Henry Wilson, he ends up giving a copy of this new idea of Plan 1919 to Foch. And he's saying, look, we should be starting to think about what we're going to do next year. And in that document, he actually cites they are going to need 10,500 tanks ready for the following year. We don't actually know Foch's response to that document, but you can see that momentum's going, and you can also see that some of the ideas you can't help see being developed anyway throughout 1918, and certainly things like the Battle of Amiens chimes very well with some of the things that are being proposed in Plan 1919. Now, we have the benefit of hindsight. We know that in actual fact, the Germans defeated in November of 1918, and Plan 1919 very quickly, including some of the vehicles, including the Medium D. We've already got the Medium C is starting to go into production. All of this is suddenly put on hold. There's absolutely no need for these vehicles. One or two are further developed. Some go and actually take place. A vehicle called the Hornet takes part in the Victory Parade in 1919. But the actual ideas are then stopped because there's no need for them. But Fuller's plan is studied by many different people. It's looked on as being perhaps the start of this idea of fully mechanised warfare. Again, so many people look at it as perhaps as an embryonic Blitzkrieg, the use of different type of motorised transport, armour, all put together with air power in a large scale to get a strategic victory. In other words, a major victory will come of the use of these ideas. Fuller's plan was actually translated in 1927 by the German military, so it was circulated in Germany, and it was also his own autobiography that includes these plans were published in German just before the Second World War in 1937. Now, Fuller as a character is a bit of an odd character. He's very interested in Satanism, all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and in the 30s he also then leans towards fascism. And Hitler invites Fuller to his 50th birthday parade in April of 1939. And at the end of this enormous march past, it goes on for about 3 hours, lots and lots of armoured vehicles being used. Hitler looks at Fuller. He's purported to have said, what do you think of your children? And Fuller says, they've grown up beyond recognition. So there are accounts of how some of the Germans, including Hitler himself, are looking at some of Fuller's ideas as he's the guy that starts off this idea of that we know of in World War II, perhaps as Blitzkrieg, but the use of all-arms battle on a fundamentally much larger scale to create a strategic victory that's going to actually lead to something.
Okay, now if you enjoyed that bit of film or any of the bits of film we've made, if you'd subscribe to YouTube, that helps us a great deal, and more so if you'll support Patreon, because that's something that we really can do with. Thanks very much.